If you've swallowed a blood pressure pill every single morning for the last year, amlodipine, losartan, or lisinopril, I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with it instead of rushing past it. How confident are you that you understand what that pill is doing inside your body right now, at this exact moment? Not what the label says, not the one rushed sentence your pharmacist mumbled while sliding the bag across the counter. I mean, truly understand it, how it works, how it can quietly turn against you under the wrong conditions, and which warning signs separate a harmless inconvenience from a situation that needs urgent medical attention. Most people I ask that question to, sharp people, careful people, people who balance their own checkbooks and read the news every morning, go quiet. And that pause tells me everything I need to know. Because here's the truth nobody says out loud in a rushed 10-minute appointment. These are not gentle medications. They are not vitamins. Amlodipine, losartan, and lisinopril are powerful drugs that reach into how your heart pumps, how your blood vessels behave, and how your kidneys filter your blood every single day, whether you're paying attention or not. And yet millions of seniors take them on autopilot, with almost no understanding of what to watch for, what to avoid, or when an ordinary symptom is actually their body sending an urgent signal. Today, that changes. My name is Dr. James Revealio, and this channel exists for exactly one reason: to hand you the kind of clear, honest, practical health information that almost never survives a rushed office visit. By the end of this video, you will understand these 3 medications better than most people ever will. And that understanding is going to make you safer, calmer, and far harder to catch off guard. Before we go any further, I want you to do something for me. Type your name and the city or state you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know exactly who I'm talking to today. Let me start with a story because it sets up everything that follows. This is Walter's story. Walter's story. Walter was 74, a retired mechanical engineer, precise, methodical, the kind of man who labeled his toolbox drawers. His daughter had set up a weekly pill organizer for him, Monday through Sunday, and Walter treated that little plastic case with the same discipline he once brought to Blueprints. He never missed a dose, not once. When his cardiologist added amlodipine to his regimen, Walter didn't ask many questions. He figured it was simply another blood pressure pill. Same category, different name, nothing to think twice about. That single, reasonable-sounding assumption nearly cost him an entire year of his life. 3 months later, Walter's feet had swollen so much he couldn't fit into a single pair of his regular shoes. By 4 in the afternoon, his legs felt like they were filled with wet sand. He started skipping his evening walks because moving made the heaviness worse. Quietly, without telling anyone, he began Googling heart failure symptoms at 2 in the morning. He was frightened, and he was frightened alone. The real explanation was far simpler than heart failure and far more manageable. But Walter never got there on his own, because no one had ever sat him down and explained that amlodipine, losartan, and lisinopril, despite all being called blood pressure medications, are not the same drug wearing different names. They lower blood pressure, yes. That is where the similarity ends. 3 drugs, 3 very different machines. Amlodipine is a calcium channel blocker. It works by relaxing the smooth muscle inside the walls of your arteries so blood moves through with less resistance. Think of it as loosening a tightly clenched fist. Lisinopril is an ACE inhibitor. It blocks a specific enzyme responsible for tightening your blood vessels. Block the enzyme and the vessels stay looser and pressure drops. Losartan is an ARB, an angiotensin receptor blocker. It acts on almost the same hormonal pathway as lisinopril, but through a different door entirely, which matters far more than most patients ever realize. 3 different mechanisms, 3 different side effect profiles, 3 different sets of warning signs to watch for. Once you understand that distinction, You stop interpreting every strange symptom through a single generic lens, and that shift alone can save you months of needless fear. Walter's swelling was never heart failure. It was amlodipine doing precisely what amlodipine does in a meaningful percentage of the people who take it, relaxing the small arteries in the legs more effectively than the veins can compensate, so fluid pools in the lower legs and ankles. Once we identified it and adjusted his plan, Walter was back in his walking shoes within a few weeks. An entire year of quiet suffering undone in weeks once someone finally connected the dots. The name printed on your prescription bottle is not just a label, it's a category. And that category tells you the exact pattern to watch for in your own body. Amlodipine and the swelling nobody explains properly. Let's slow down on that swelling because it is one of the most misunderstood side effects in all of blood pressure medicine, and it touches an enormous number of people taking amlodipine. Here is what is actually happening inside your legs, explained the way I wish someone had explained it to Walter on day one. When amlodipine relaxes the small arteries feeding your legs, more blood flows in. But your veins, the vessels responsible for carrying that blood back up toward your heart, do not relax in the same way or to the same degree. That creates an imbalance, more blood arriving than leaving. Pressure builds inside the tiny vessels near your ankles and feet, and eventually that pressure forces fluid out of the vessels and into the surrounding soft tissue. The result is puffy ankles, sock lines that dig deep grooves into your skin by evening, shoes that no longer fit the way they used to, and legs that feel heavy and full by late afternoon. I need you to hear this clearly. This is not fluid retention from too much salt. This is not your kidneys failing. This is not the beginning of heart failure. In the overwhelming majority of cases, it is a predictable mechanical consequence of exactly how amlodipine works in the body. Here is where it becomes genuinely dangerous, not the swelling itself, but how people respond to it. Some patients notice the swelling and quietly stop taking the medication on their own without telling their doctor, and their blood pressure creeps back up while they believe they made a sensible decision. Others keep taking the medication but start restricting water because they assume they're retaining fluid, which is exactly the wrong instinct, since dehydration on a calcium channel blocker carries its own set of risks. And some, like Walter, simply suffer in silence for months, shrinking their world one missed walk at a time, assuming the worst, and losing quality of life for no reason at all. The move I want burned into your memory is this. Leg swelling on amlodipine is a conversation your doctor needs to have, not a decision you make alone at your kitchen table. It doesn't necessarily mean the drug is wrong for you. It may simply mean there are adjustments available, elevating your legs in the evening, changing the timing of your dose, compression stockings, or in some cases, switching to a different medication that fits your body more comfortably. None of those options exist for you if you never say anything. So tell me in the comments, have you ever noticed that heavy, swollen feeling creep into your legs by the end of the day? I promise you, you are far from alone. Lisinopril and the cough that fools everyone. Now let's talk about lisinopril and the most notorious side effect in the entire ACE inhibitor family, the cough. Not a wet, productive cough, a dry, scratchy, relentless tickle at the back of the throat that tends to worsen at night and simply refuses to respond to cough drops, lozenges, antihistamines, or anything else sitting in your medicine cabinet. Here's what makes this particular symptom so deceptive. It rarely announces itself right away. Some people develop it within the first week of starting lisinopril. Others don't notice it until 3 or 4 months in, and by that point, the connection to their medication has completely vanished from their mind. They've already been taking the pill for months without incident, so naturally they blame dust, seasonal allergies, a lingering cold, or acid reflux instead. Let me tell you about Evelyn. Evelyn was 71, a devoted gardener who spent her mornings on her knees among the tomato plants. When her cough started, it was late spring, peak pollen season, so the explanation seemed obvious. She bought antihistamines. She invested in an air purifier for her bedroom. She mentioned it to her primary doctor, who ordered a chest X-ray that came back completely clear. 6 months later, the cough was still there. Her sleep was fractured almost every single night. She was exhausted, irritable, and quietly starting to believe something serious was being missed entirely. When Evelyn finally came to see me, one of the first questions I asked was simple. When exactly did you start Lisinopril relative to when this cough first appeared? She went silent for a moment, pulled out her phone, and started scrolling through her pharmacy app to do the math. She had started Lisinopril 11 months earlier. The cough had crept in around the 4-month mark. She had never once connected the two. We worked with her primary doctor to transition her to Losartan, a medication that acts on a similar pathway but does not typically trigger this particular cough. Within 2 weeks, the tickle in her throat was gone. 11 months of shattered sleep, undone in 14 days, once somebody finally asked the right question. Now, and this is the single most important distinction I will make in this entire video, so please give me your full attention. There is one symptom in the ACE inhibitor family that is not a nuisance. It is a genuine medical emergency, and confusing it with an ordinary cough can be dangerous. If you are taking Lisinopril and you notice swelling of your lips, your tongue, your face, or your throat, especially if swallowing or breathing starts to feel difficult, you do not wait. You do not call the office in the morning. You do not take a Benadryl and see how it goes. You call emergency services immediately. This condition is called angioedema. It is rare, but it is absolutely real, and it can close off your airway far faster than most people expect. A dry cough is an annoyance. Throat swelling is an emergency. The gap between those two things is enormous, and I need you to keep that line permanently clear in your mind. If nobody has ever broken your blood pressure medication down this clearly before, hit subscribe right now, because what comes next may matter just as much for your safety or the safety of someone you love. Losartan and the danger hiding in the healthy choice. Let's move to Losartan, and a risk I find particularly striking because it doesn't come from anyone doing something careless. It comes from people doing exactly what they've been told is the responsible, health-conscious thing to do. Losartan, like Lisinopril, acts on the renin-angiotensin system, your body's internal blood pressure control network. One known effect of this entire drug class is that it can raise potassium levels in the bloodstream. For most people, monitored appropriately, that stays comfortably within a safe range. But stack certain everyday lifestyle choices on top of it, and the picture shifts quickly. Here's the part that surprises almost everyone. Potassium doesn't only come from bananas or supplement bottles. It's hiding in products actively marketed as the healthier option, salt substitutes. Many of the most popular low-sodium salt alternatives, sitting right on the shelf beside ordinary table salt and branded as heart healthy, simply replace sodium chloride with potassium chloride. So picture the scenario. A senior is told by a well-meaning doctor to cut back on sodium. They buy a potassium-based salt substitute and use it liberally on nearly everything they eat. Meanwhile, they're already taking a medication that raises potassium on its own. Now they are loading potassium into their system from 2 directions at once, without anyone monitoring the combined effect. That combination can push potassium high enough to interfere with the electrical rhythm of the heart. And here is what makes it especially dangerous. High potassium rarely announces itself loudly. It tends to whisper first. Unusual muscle weakness, persistent fatigue, cramping in the legs, tingling in the hands and fingers, or an irregular, fluttering heartbeat. Sometimes there are barely any warning symptoms at all, right up until there are serious ones. I want you to think right now of one specific person in your life who has switched to a salt substitute in the past year or two. Maybe it's you. If that person also takes Losartan or Lisinopril, this is a conversation worth having with a doctor. Not because the medication is dangerous on its own, not because potassium-rich foods are the enemy, but because the combination, without awareness and appropriate monitoring, can quietly build into a problem that never needed to happen in the first place. And salt substitutes aren't the only hidden source. Certain electrolyte powders, some meal replacement shakes, and specific over-the-counter sports recovery drinks also carry meaningful potassium loads. Nobody thinks to mention these to their doctor because they're not medications, and that is exactly why they matter so much. What happens to these drugs when you get sick? There is one scenario I don't think gets nearly enough attention in conversations about blood pressure medication, and it affects seniors more than any other age group. What happens to these drugs when you simply get sick? Not hospitalized, not seriously ill, just an ordinary stomach bug, a few days of vomiting, diarrhea that won't quit, a loss of appetite, or even a hot summer week with heavy sweating and not quite enough fluid intake. When your body becomes dehydrated, for any reason at all, the exact same dose of Losartan or Lisinopril that was perfectly calibrated for a well-hydrated body can behave dramatically differently. Your blood pressure can drop too low. Your kidneys, already working harder to compensate for fluid loss, become more vulnerable. Dizziness, weakness, faintness, or even acute kidney strain can develop faster than most people expect. The medication itself didn't change. Your body's internal environment changed, and the drug is now operating in conditions it was never calibrated for. This is one of the most practically important things I can tell you today. Illness changes the rules. And if you don't already have a plan for what to do when illness hits, whether to hold a dose, when to call your doctor, which symptoms should send you in for a visit, you are carrying a real gap in your safety net, whether you realize it or not. That plan should come from your prescribing doctor before you ever need it. If you don't already have one, ask at your very next appointment, what should I do with my blood pressure medication if I catch a stomach virus or can't keep food and fluids down? It is one of the most important questions you can ask and one of the least commonly asked. So tell me honestly in the comments, has your doctor ever given you a specific sick day plan for your blood pressure medication? Just yes or no. I have a feeling I already know what most of your answers will be. The painkiller sitting in your medicine cabinet. Here's a scenario I want you to picture. You've had a rough week. Your arthritis is flaring, your knees ache, your back feels stiff every time you stand up. You make a quick trip to the drugstore and grab a bottle of ibuprofen, something you've used casually for years, something so ordinary it barely registers as medicine at all. Now layer that on top of taking Lisinopril or Losartan. Maybe you're also on a diuretic, a water pill for additional fluid management. Used regularly, this combination can meaningfully reduce blood flow to your kidneys. And layered on top of even mild dehydration, the risk of kidney injury rises substantially. This is not some rare hypothetical. It is one of the most common and most preventable situations I encounter. And the reason it slips through the cracks so often is simple. Patients don't mentally file ibuprofen, naproxen, or similar over-the-counter anti-inflammatories in the same category as their prescription medications. They're just something from the drugstore for the pain. But your kidneys don't distinguish between prescription and over-the-counter. They respond to chemistry, not to labels. If you routinely reach for anti-inflammatory pain relievers for arthritis, joint pain, or back pain, and you're taking any of these 3 blood pressure medications, please raise it with your doctor. There are frequently safer alternatives available: acetaminophen, topical treatments, physical therapy approaches, or other strategies that don't carry the same kidney risk. You do not have to simply endure the pain, and you do not have to silently accept the risk. There is almost always a better path. You just need someone willing to help you find it. I want to spend real time on something that sounds small and absolutely is not: dizziness. That brief, wobbly moment when you stand up off the couch or climb out of bed in the morning. The room tilts for a second. You grab the door frame or the nightstand. It passes, and you go about your day thinking, I just stood up too fast. For a large number of seniors on blood pressure medication, this is a regular experience, and it is almost universally underreported because it feels too minor to bring up. Here is what I need you to truly understand. In older adults, a few seconds of dizziness is enough to cause a fall. A fall is enough to cause a fracture, and a fracture, particularly a hip fracture, can derail an older adult's entire health trajectory in ways that can take years to recover from, if full recovery happens at all. I am not saying this to alarm you. I am saying it because it is simple physics and biology working together, and it deserves your full respect. The dizziness happens because your medication is doing exactly what it was designed to do, lowering your blood pressure. When you stand up quickly, your cardiovascular system hasn't had a moment yet to compensate for the change in position. Blood pressure briefly dips. Blood flow to the brain momentarily decreases. You feel it as that lightheaded, tilting sensation. The fix is often refreshingly simple. Rise slowly. Sit on the edge of the bed for a moment before standing all the way up. Hold on to something stable, a nightstand, a chair, a wall, while you get your bearings. Give your body a few extra seconds to catch up with the change in position. But beyond that practical habit, there's an important line to draw. Dizziness that happens regularly, dizziness that doesn't fade after the first few weeks on a new medication, or any episode that comes close to fainting, those are signals that deserve a real conversation with your doctor. Your dose may need adjustment. The combination of medications you're on may need review. Something in your hydration habits may need to shift. Staying silent about this is not a small risk to take. The timing mistake almost nobody talks about. Before we move on, I want to touch on something that seems too small to matter and actually matters quite a bit when you take these pills, not just whether you take them. A growing body of research has looked at what happens when blood pressure medications are taken in the evening rather than the first thing in the morning, particularly for people whose blood pressure tends to stay elevated overnight instead of dipping the way it should. For some patients, shifting the timing of a dose can smooth out those overnight numbers in a way that morning dosing alone doesn't achieve. I'm not telling you to change when you take your pill today, right after watching this video. What I am telling you is that timing is a legitimate, evidence-based conversation to have with your doctor, not something fixed in stone the day your prescription was written. There's a second layer to this that matters just as much for amlodipine specifically. Because it works gradually, relaxing your arteries over many hours rather than in one sharp burst, missing a single dose usually doesn't cause a dramatic spike the way missing certain other medications might. That's actually useful information because it means if you occasionally forget a dose, the right response is calm, check the guidance that came with your prescription, take it as soon as you remember unless it's nearly time for the next one, and move forward. Panic and doubling up are far more likely to cause harm than a single missed pill ever will. Lisinopril and Losartan behave a little differently since they interact directly with your kidneys and your body's fluid balance. Consistency matters more with these two, and if you find yourself frequently forgetting doses, that's worth mentioning at your next appointment too. Sometimes a simple pill organizer, a phone alarm, or pairing the dose with an existing daily habit like brushing your teeth is enough to close that gap completely. How to actually use your next doctor's appointment. I want to give you something practical to walk away with, because information without action tends to fade within a week. The average primary care visit runs somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes, and a shocking amount of that time gets consumed by paperwork, vitals, and general check-ins before you even get to ask your real questions. If you walk in without a plan, the conversation about your medication often doesn't happen at all, not because your doctor doesn't care, but because the clock simply runs out. So here's what I want you to do. Before your next appointment, write down 3 things on a piece of paper or in your phone. First, any new or unusual symptom you've noticed since your last visit, even if it seems minor or unrelated. Swelling, a persistent cough, dizziness, unusual tiredness, or muscle cramping. Second, every over-the-counter product you're currently using regularly, including pain relievers, salt substitutes, supplements, and any powders or drink mixes. Third, one direct question you want answered before you leave the room, such as, what should I do if I get sick and can't keep fluids down? Or, is the timing of my dose optimal for me? Blood pressure is not a fixed number. It moves constantly, hour by hour, in response to dozens of variables. How well you slept last night, whether you had caffeine, whether you're in pain, whether you're nervous about the reading itself, whether you just walked in from outside, whether you were talking loudly right before you sat down. My name is Dr. James Revealio, and I'll see you in the next one.